2 months ago, I received an unexpected email. Someone had sent me a URL. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Sure, I browsed the website. I even read the content. But it didn't register in my mind at the time. 2 days ago, I was asked to give a talk on MOOCs. Oh boy, I told myself, where do I start? There was so much to say. So rather than give a lecture on the mechanics of the subject, I decided to share my personal reflections. I limited myself 5 slides for the top 5 lessons I learned, and how I am now incorporating my new knowledge into my job. But after I gave my talk, my mind kept going back to that email from 2 months ago. That's when my mind opened up. I knew what I had to do. This story must be shared. In the past 7 months, my life had taken a drastic change. I can't find the words that would adequately describe all the people from all over the world whom I have engaged with, and many of whom I continue to work with online. So on many different projects at so many levels. The one thing that I realize we have in common is that we, humans as a whole, all have aspirations. We all want to improve our lives. Maslow called this the hierarchy of needs. We start from the very basics of physical necessities and we strive to higher levels of social esteem, love, and values right at the top. But at every step, everything we do, we need to learn. Our learning world is a composite environment. It's where we live, where we go to school, where we go to college, where some of us continue to grad school, and of course, where we work. Our world is our working, living, and learning environment. But this is where the problem begins. Our learning mechanisms are predefined. Formal learning is relegated to the confines of K-12. We live at home, we go to school, we graduate and move on to college. And then we enter the workforce, or continue back to grad school, and then end up in the workforce again. Once we enter the workforce, our world changes. There isn't much of a flow anymore. Any new learning that occurs is often done through training among peers. There is seldom cross-pollination, and even less input from bottom up. And even though there are all sorts of research and development efforts with the intent of developing better solutions in every possible field of study, all these efforts are led by academics in higher education. R&D is traditionally under the purview of academia. People in the working and living world are often not involved, and usually have no opportunity to become involved. This existing education system is secular. We may argue that the existing system has adequate checks and balances put in place. Curriculum development is carried out at every level and for the most part with great rigor and rigid regulation. However, the existing system is based on traditional literacies. The 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, have been around for over 200 years. And by the way, 2 of the 3 R's aren't even spelled with R's. But today, the world is a different place. The literacies required for today's world are very different. Today, when we interact with people, we engage in our working and living and learning environment, we need a whole new set of competencies. Today's world is all about connectedness. We reach out to others as they reach out to us too. We respond in context, adopting and adapting to suit our individual needs. We have the search capacity to find and define our own content and context. We also have the power of technology to help us document and reflect on our learning in multiple modes, with individual autonomy. And since today's technology affords us with all this, with speed and efficiency, we can reiterate the learning journey through so many options for optimal individualized learning. And yet, we are still tied to traditional education. This brings me to the core issue. By maintaining an education system that is based on a 200-year-old set of literacies, we are victimizing a whole population of people. First of all, we know that each of us is different. We have different learning styles, we come from different backgrounds, we have different interests, and although a few of us might take the path of personal customization, the majority of us have no choice but to comply with the traditional education that we have to fitting into the box, even though one size does not fit all. This needs mismatch becomes more apparent when we look at the existing mechanisms for benchmarking. In the traditional education system, quality assurance is often regulated through standardized curricula. The need for economic scalability and replicability forces learners to have to fit into one-size box, and that one-size box is then mass implemented across an artificially homogenized educational landscape. The same curriculum is expected to work in different contexts, even though those contexts are entirely different. To make things worse, in today's world, this context is now globalized. The one-size box is expected to fit everyone in every context. This expectation cuts across the whole world, and since nobody wants to be left behind, there is a blind rush to comply. Those who can tolerate the handcuffs will stay within the system, often unhappy, unfulfilled, and unmotivated, and those who cannot end up dropping out of the radar. Lost manpower, lost opportunity, or simply lost. And yet technology advancements do not stop. Today's world keeps getting more and more connected. More and more people from all over the world ironically continue to flock in, attracted to these one-size boxes, and although some of these boxes have changed form slightly, some are given fancy names such as open resources or MOOCs or whatever, the bottom line still remains. The existing education system, as it exists today, is still based on traditional benchmarking. This is the core issue. All the people who do not fit into this traditional system are the core issue. They are cognitive refugees. They do not belong anywhere because they have nowhere to go. None of the existing environments are designed for their needs. This is a massive core issue because these cognitive refugees now exist everywhere. This problem is global. Technology as is applied into education today has not closed the gap. It has instead highlighted even further the growing number of cognitive refugees in the world. The symptoms of this core issue are prevalent. Every select few will rise above the stagnant status quo. These are the Bill Gates of the world, college dropouts who miraculously defy tradition. On the other extreme, some cognitive refugees live out of a life of ignorance. These few are also the lucky few, for they will not yearn what they do not know exists. But most cognitive refugees will end up in limbo, in less than desirable careers, with no careers, only jobs that pay the bills, if they're lucky. And the last group are the ones we fear, the tortured souls, who live in agonizing silence, with no access to what they need, and who are potential time bombs, who in ignorance and frustration could end up hurting themselves or others. The pedagogy of the oppressed. Freire warned us of this almost 50 years ago. And yet, we are still using the same model. We are still forcing compliance. We are still forcing compliance. Secular, archaic, discriminatory, our education system is simply sad, and it needs to be jailbroken. Reclaim open learning really hit close home for me, for I am myself a cognitive refugee. We often choose to be politically correct by labeling things with neutral, unobtrusive terminologies. But what if we flip the tables around? Just like we flip classrooms and roles. What if we turn the problem into the solution? A glass half full, a glass half empty. It's the same glass. It's the same issue, but seen from different lenses. What if the cognitive refugees are the solution? How can we leverage their potential? 30 years ago, Lev Vygotsky introduced the idea of scaffolding learning through social engagement. Through the sheer power of human interaction, people can bridge the gap and produce learning outcomes of amazing magnitude. Although the zone of proximal development has proven to be a winning formula, academia today still hasn't quite found the formula to ensure ZPD. More importantly, while there are countless studies on measuring how novice learners learn from an expert, There aren't many reciprocal studies which examine the reverse flow. What can the learner give to the reader, to the teacher? More recently, David Cormier described rhizomatic learning, a multi-directional framework that attempts to describe the learning that occurs spontaneously in social networks online. My own thesis, 10 years ago, looked at a similar organic analogy, osmosis learning, the natural attraction and exchange that occurs when two or more people of differing knowledge levels come in close contact. In both propositions, learning is nonlinear, instinctive, and inevitable. I recall my alma mater slogan very clearly. I would found an institution where any person can find any instruction in any study. At that time, I thought that this founding principle was revolutionary, given that Cornell was founded only a couple of years after slaves in the U.S. had been set free. Fast forward to today, a couple of years after the first MOOC was offered for free, I envisioned the design of a new learning environment, a democratic open university that is grown from the grassroots, an institution where any person can receive or share instruction in any study. DoYou will not be a physical place, nor will it be an online portal. DoYou is a concept, a philosophy, a generic ubiquitous set of universal protocols, an agreement to learn. The driving force of this entity will be action research, carried out by the learners themselves, a grounded and ground upwards model, a design-based work in progress, adapting to the emergent practices of the learners as they go. DoYou is a space where we will both learn and teach. Our unifying vision is the common goal of wanting to learn and do better. This would be a true open university. There would be no entry requirements for both the learner and the teacher. The only requirement should be the passion to do better. Coaching metacognition and mentoring step by step are examples of pedagogical models to be experimented and documented in this effort. The method of experimentation will be through immersion. We will come from all walks of life, working, living, or learning environments, embedded within our own environment. But unlike the traditional model, DoYou will have no boundaries. Anyone from any background will have the opportunity to examine our own learning. We will be given the necessary tools and support we need to analyze, evaluate, and self-determine what we believe we need for our own context. We will be heutagogical, self-determined learners. Our collective body of investigative knowledge will form the core connectivist discourse in this new learning environment. In other words, DoYou will be of the people, by the people, and for the people. The community has become the curriculum. The role of the system would merely serve as a catalyst to mobilize open, ongoing connectivist communities online. We will redefine MOOC 2.0. It is a vehicle driven by us, the learners. We will decide where we want to go, which direction, at what speed, and to what destination. Our fuel in this journey is our desire to learn. Mobilization from motivation. We will still need literacies and skills to navigate and deploy open source and open access tools. We will nurture relationships amongst ourselves, students, teachers, professors, grandmas and grandpas alike, all interchangeable roles, leaders and partners in innovative learning. We will learn from our mentors, and in return, we will teach our mentors what and how we want to learn from them. Our interactions will be documented, open and transparent. The learning design cycle will be formative and dynamic. Our mentors will become more efficient in their coaching, and we will become more responsive in our learning. In order to facilitate the development of these needed competencies, various different programs need to be put in place. We do not need to aim for PhDs, but we must become DRs, digital residents. DR redefined. The key formula to making this model sustainable is to decentralize and implement step by step. Scalability will not be achieved through massive numbers. Instead, Small, tangible communities will form, connected through online networks. Each cohort will be heutagogical, self-determined based on our interests, our needs, and our personality dynamics. Geographic boundaries and spatial distance will be secondary. Measurable endorsements in the form of badges or certificates can be incorporated, but not necessarily required. Real affirmation comes from our live demonstration, from shifting from being learner to becoming teacher. Step by step will be metacognitive, using systemic vertical studio method. Some of us will first to play the role of catalyst, moderator, or resource. We will be intervention instigators in the online space. We will proactively engage in dialogue, guiding novice learners, and as we coach others, they, in turn, will become coaches, sharing their knowledge and skills in their own pace. Each tier will engage in multi-directional osmosis learning, progressively moving up through Bloom's taxonomy, striving to reach the highest level in the cognitive domain. Meanwhile, through the process, we will run through rigorous checks and balances in the affective domain to ensure the safety and well-being for all. We will learn to ask for help, progressively acquiring the skills and knowledge for humanistic e-learning protocols. Given that the main ingredient in Vygotsky's ZPD is interpersonal relationship, it is critical that we developed our affective domain, equal to our cognitive domain. Once a stable interpersonal relationship is established, we can deep dive into intense binge learning and high-stress pedagogical methods such as charrettes, risk simulation, and being wired in. We will grow to be an army of learners who are hyper-aware and hyper-connected and hyper-knowledgeable in educational resources and sharing. We will be hackers, an intense personal learning network. This vision is not hypothetical. It's already happening. These are a few of my personal learning network connections. In comparison to my mentors, I am relatively new. Some of the people I learn from are amazing individuals. They share and coach so many others. They are hyper-connected and selfless in the sharing. At present, there is a group of us who are actively tracking and studying the connectivist patterns of discussion engagement. We are experimenting and researching through intervention and active participation. Our research questions include: what are the circumstances in an online discussion that trigger engagement? How do discussions sustain interest? What is the formula for soliciting longer dialogue posts? Do cross-reference links enhance the depth of dialogue? The platform we use is Google+. Maximizing the readily available analytics and research tools such as ripples and command codes like InURL. And since the public available tools are limited, we are constantly pushing the boundaries of communication, pulling in more people into the study, making connections with programmers, coders, and sometimes people who are involved in the Google platforms themselves. This connectivity makes us hyper-aware. Often our connection with research collaborators are frequent, intense, and much more efficient than face-to-face interaction. The online open-source tools such as Hangouts on Air and other OERs facilitate our documentation of collaboration, allowing us to revisit, revise, reflect, and improve upon our work. And the projects that we are able to work on through our virtual connected world are exciting, invigorating, and above what we would ever be able to do in our day jobs. Here, we are no longer cognitive refugees. We belong, we connect, we learn. This is my world, my working, living, and learning environment, where my learning is rhizomatic, online, and zealous. My name is Rose, and I see the world. Do you?